From Chicago, welcome to 3Degrees Discussions. I'm your host, Mike Vasquez. This is a podcast devoted to the stories behind the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the 3D printing industry.
There's a lot of inherent advantages to offsite construction, even with traditional materials. One of the biggest being that you can be building the unit while you're doing the site work. So you're guaranteeing shorter timelines. You can also, because like with one of these, we can deliver, and once the foundation's completed, we can deliver and install and seal and weld and inspect in a day. In fact, we recently did that with one of our duos, which is a 2-module unit in San Leandro. To be fair, that's somewhat rare that you get all the subcontractors and the inspectors to actually show up on the same, but it is possible.
That was Sam Ruben. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer and co-founder of Oakland-based Mighty Buildings. Mighty Buildings is on a quest to build homes using 3D printing, robotics, and automation. Their system is able to build homes 2 times as quickly with 95% less labor hours and 10 times less waste than conventional construction. In fact, they can 3D print a 350 square foot studio apartment in just 24 hours. He joined the show today to talk about the company and the journey to bring 3D printing to construction. Before we get started, head over to www.3degreescompany.com and subscribe to the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the show anywhere you download your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or Stitcher. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining the show today. Why don't we just start with kind of what is Mighty Buildings, and we'll go from there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's a great opportunity. Really appreciate it, the chance to share what we're doing and chance to connect with you. I still remember when we first met down in Auburn, down in Alabama. Was it the first Center of Excellence workshop for ASTM?
I think that's right.
I think so. Yeah. That was a great event. So Mighty Buildings. So we are 3D printing housing, but unlike a lot of the other 3D printing companies in the space, we are not using concrete. We have actually developed a unique material that we can 3D print using light. So if people may be familiar with some of the synthetic stones like corian and others that have been used for countertops and building claddings and other use cases in construction going back to the 60s, same idea, same type of material. So it's a thermoset composite. But instead of casting it into big pieces that we then mill down to create the shapes we need, we've developed a unique formulation and a unique production process that actually allows us to 3D print it using extrusion and then cure it with UV light that hits it as soon as it comes out, which is really pretty cool, because what it means is not only can we do the floors and the walls, but we can also do the ceiling. And it opens up whole new possibilities in terms of design, because the material cures quickly enough that it can support its own weight. So that means we can do unsupported spans, we can do curves, we can do fun stuff like that. But what's awesome is that it still has full chemical cohesion between the layers. So that's one of the really keys to what we're doing. Is because with 3D print concrete, you're still dealing with mechanical adhesion. And if you're not careful and with your formula and everything, you can end up with cold joints, layer separation, and other things, which is much less of an issue with what we're doing. Additionally, because of the unique nature of our material, even though it's really strong, and we actually have a new fiber reinforced version of it that we're moving through certification now and hoping to begin delivering units with at the end of later this year, very beginning of next year. And so that fiber reinforced version has a strength profile similar to steel reinforced concrete, with 4 times less weight and 4 times better insulating properties. And so even though it's really, really strong like that, one of the exciting things is that it's still soft enough that we can mill it with CNC heads that are normally used for metals like aluminum and copper. So that means that we can leave the raw print, which some people really love and are willing to pay a lot of money to have done with traditional materials. And it really is. And we've got it dialed in. It's like a 4mm beautiful print. Just like that, it actually looks gorgeous. But we can also mill it so it's a smooth stone-like finish. And this is where I get excited, and we haven't had the opportunity to do this yet because none of our designs have called for it. But there's no reason we couldn't make it look like brickwork, make it look like siding, or make it look like something no one's ever seen before, or a completely new facade that plays with milled and unmilled. And so there's a lot of exciting opportunities, both in terms of form as well as finish when it comes to aesthetic possibilities.
And so what's there's a lot of kind of dialogue about 3D printing and construction, but what are some of the underlying challenges in the construction space that, for those who may not be familiar with it, or should be aware of? What should we
Yeah.
other than lumber prices are out of control?
Well, I mean, that's more of an opportunity than a challenge for us, but because we're not using lumber, so we're avoiding that 36,000 in additional costs for an average single family home that we've seen since 2019 due to lumber costs. But so what some of the big challenges are regulatory and just inherent to the nature of the industry, because the sad reality is that the building codes are written in blood. They exist because things went wrong and people got hurt and people died. So demonstrating that safety is crucially important. Additionally, because of that reality, and others as well, the construction industry and construction officials tend to be more conservative. They tend to be slow to adopt new technologies. And again, I get that. The building codes exist because people died, and we're trying to avoid that at all costs. So what we've been doing is we've been focusing on the regulatory side of things from the very beginning. So we've partnered with UL, Underwood Laboratories, which is one of the world's oldest and largest 3D third-party certifying agencies. And what's really cool about them is that along with having over 100 years of building life safety experience, I mean, they were doing fire testing back at like the beginning of the last century, or maybe even late 1800s. I mean,
because of the Chicago fire, right?
Exactly. Fire testing because of the again, things went wrong and people died, unfortunately. But what's cool is that not they have that amazing life building experience, but also some of the world's leading experts in additive manufacturing. So they're uniquely situated to understand both the technology and then understand what does it look like to demonstrate code compliance of that technology. So they've been an amazing partner, and working with them, we've actually helped them develop UL 3401, which is the world's first standard for 3D printed construction. Additionally, that's been added as an adoptable appendix to the 2021 International Residential Code, which will be published beginning of next year, which means that municipalities and jurisdictions will actually be able to take that appendix and adopt it formally into their code. And beyond that, they're also working on getting it added to the IBC. Additionally, there have been a number of efforts with ICC, the International Code Council, on the concrete side. So originally you had Contour Crafting, which is a 3D printing concrete company out of Los Angeles area, who worked with ICC to get an evaluation report and an acceptance criteria created for 3D printed concrete. That has since been expanded to allow for up to 4 stories in concert with Black Buffalo, which is another 3D printed concrete company that produces printers there, I believe, connected to some part of the Hyundai conglomerate. I can't remember which one, but they're doing some really interesting work in that space too, to again move the regulatory space forward. Additionally, there's ongoing efforts with ASTM. We're actually leading their subsection on F420707 subsection on the application of additive manufacturing to construction. There's also joint efforts between ISO and ASTM. I believe it's Joint Group 80. That's similarly working on standards for construction. And then there's also been some efforts in, I believe, the ASTM CO2, CO6, and CO9 committees working on 3D printed concrete standards. And I'm also involved with ASTM's E5203 committee, or 02, I think, which is the climate and community. And so that's one of the things that we're really excited about, is how do we make sure that as we're developing the standards, we're bringing sustainability and resilience, regeneration into that. Because given the nature of the housing crisis, I mean, we need over 1 billion houses globally to actually help ensure people have access can attain housing and housing with dignity. Currently, construction is 11% of all GHG emissions. Building energy use is another 30% almost of building energy emissions. So that means buildings, both the building of them and the use of them, account for almost 40% of all global emissions. Now, if we're going to build 1 billion plus houses globally, and I do think 3D printing has a huge role to play in this, we have to figure out how do we do it in a way that doesn't exacerbate the climate crisis, and ideally is actually a part of the solution for pulling us back from the brink. And so 3D printing, both what we're doing and just more broadly, I think has a huge opportunity, because unlike a lot of construction technologies, it only uses the material you need. You're not starting with a big piece and cutting it down and then having to figure out what do you do with these small pieces, which often end up in landfill. You actually can just, from the beginning, exactly what you need. And because of the ability to do unique geometries and everything, we can actually create structures that use less material than it would be if it was being built with traditionally.
And do you build your there's an example in your background of one of your buildings, but do you build that offsite and then bring it to a fixed location? Because I imagine seeing houses kind of go up around the neighborhood, I mean, it's a big logistics issue. You're waiting for this material, that material, there's weather involved. Like how does your process differ?
Yeah, so we've embraced prefabrication. There's a lot of inherent advantages to offsite construction, even with traditional materials. One of the biggest being that you can be building the unit while you're doing the site work. So you're guaranteeing shorter timelines. You can also, because like with one of these, we can deliver, and once the foundation's completed, we can deliver and install and seal and weld and inspect in a day. In fact, we recently did that with one of our duos, which is a 2-module unit in San Leandro. To be fair, that's somewhat rare that you get all the subcontractors and the inspectors to actually show up on the same, but it is possible. And so that meant that the site work, there's about 2 weeks, foundation got poured, 2 weeks, and now the contractors are doing the landscaping. And so really, really straightforward, easy process there. Additionally, and this gets back to the regulatory side of things. Because we're doing prefabrication, we can certify our units through the state of California rather than having to get a building permit from every individual jurisdiction. We still need local permits for the foundation, the site work, and we still need to go through the zoning and plan check. But for the code compliance, we're actually working with a third party that's certified by the state of California under the factory built housing program that's overseen by the Department of Housing and Community Development. And so what's cool about that is instead of having to convince every local jurisdiction that we meet code and having that conversation every time, we have the plans reviewed once at the state level. We get that stamp and then we bring that to the local official. And so there's some education involved there too, because a lot of local building officials aren't as familiar with the program as they might be. And obviously there's an element of a feeling of loss of control, of local control, which is understandable. So we've developed a whole process and worksheet to help them understand where their responsibilities are, where our responsibilities are, where the state certified agency's responsibilities are. And it works pretty well, especially given how backed up so many jurisdictions have been. They're beginning to really appreciate the simplicity and the ease that a factory built house brings. That said, many 3D printing is, particularly with concrete, is still happening on site. And what's interesting about that is, particularly here in the US, because of code, what you're really doing is printing formwork. You're not really printing a complete wall. So what happens is you print a couple feet. You still have to then add rebar. You still have to then add cement into the interior of that so it meets code. And then you print another few feet, do it again, let it cure. And so there's definitely some inherent drawbacks there. I do think as the material improves and as we're able to get more traction with some of these novel formulations, that there's definitely some real positives to 3D printed concrete, particularly with things like geopolymer and others that can help provide the necessary strength without the need for mandatory for steel reinforcement, as well as, frankly, just a more sustainable material that's able to eliminate the need for Portland cement. And so, what's
the kind of typical use case that you see for the houses that you've built? So they're not 6,000 square feet.
No. We very intentionally, again, going back to the sustainability question, and frankly, I actually hate the word sustainability, even though it's in my title as Chief Sustainability Officer. It's really, the idea of sustaining the status quo to me is not acceptable. We've already crossed too many lines and there's too many feedback loops that scientists are identifying, that for me, it's really important that we start thinking about resilience. How do we create structures that are well suited to what's already coming down the pipeline, what we're already seeing in terms of fires, in terms of floods, snowstorms, all of this extreme weather. Additionally, that we're doing so in a way that helps regenerate the system and helps us identify ways that we can be better and we can help undo some of the damage that's occurred. And so in that regard, we started with accessory dwelling units, which are backyard apartments. In Chicago, I believe they're called carriage houses, which is a great concept that the state of California has really embraced as a tool in helping address our housing crisis. According to a McKinsey report that came out in 2017, I think, they said that we need 3.5 million new homes in California by 2025 to address the affordability crisis. We're building less than 100,000 a year. We're not going to get to we're not getting 3.5 million homes by 2025. So we need a better way to build and we need to build more. And so the state of California has passed a series of laws making ADUs really easy to permit and streamlining them and really seeing them as a key tool and key low-hanging fruit in creating additional density. For us, we saw it as a great opportunity to go to market, demonstrate our viability of our technology, begin our certification process without competing against the builders and developers who we've always seen as our end users. So we've been working direct with consumers, going straight to homeowners, providing full turnkey experience where we handle the permitting, we handle all the site work, foundation, utilities, unit, delivery, installation, all of that. Make it as easy as possible for the homeowner. And that's been absolutely amazing. The smiles we get on people's faces when we give them the keys are incredible. And they go from everything from some people are using them as rentals, some people are using them as pool houses, some people are just using them because they want more space. Because in the pandemic, they realized, oh wow, I do not have as much house as I thought I did. But I am not going to move 3 hours away to find a house that's bigger, because that's what happens in the Bay, unless you want to drop an extra mil.
Yeah. Are you able to talk about price at all in terms of?
Yeah. So with these units, with the Duo you see behind me, which is a 1-bedroom, we have 1 and 2 bedroom versions of this. The 1 bedroom's $159, the 2 bedrooms $169 for just the units themselves. But that comes with fully finished bathroom, washer, dryer, a dishwasher, refrigerator, microwave, induction cooktop. It has everything you need, and because of the glazing, it feels a lot bigger than it is. And so,
can it go on top of a garage?
Not yet, but in theory, I mean, if we can get the permit, sure.
I'm looking at my garage out the back window.
Yeah, I totally do a garage conversion. And then fully installed, that ends up being like 30 to 60% more, depending on the site. So with these ones, ends up saying about 250 installed. And again, that doesn't include land, because that's one of the things about ADUs is you're putting it onto property where you already have a dwelling. Yep. And then with our studios, which is a 350 square foot studio one, that ends up being about 115 for the unit. Again, fully finished, everything you need except for the furniture. And then ends up being like 180 or so, 200 for installed. And then we also have a new line of products called the Mighty Homes, which are the first units designed with our Mighty Kit system, which is a new panel system, kind of like the Sears Kit Homes of the 20th century. And these were designed by EYRC architects and along with Burrell Hubbard Engineering. So along with ADUs, starting at about 400 square feet, it actually goes up to a small single family home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, just under 1,500 square feet. And that's also is our first foray into working with builders and developers. So we've got a project that was announced in Southern California in Coachella Valley with Polari Group. That's going to be the world's first 3D printed zero net energy community. So what's really exciting about that is that's, again, our step into that B2B space. And because as much as I love the smile on a homeowner's face when we give them those keys, to really impact the housing crisis, we can't just be doing units one or two at a time. We have to be doing them 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 at a time. And so that's where working with the developers and builders who are putting in projects at scale becomes really, really important. And so where we're headed is to actually be a design, product, and market agnostic production as a service platform, based on a network of what do you call Mighty factories, like the one we have here in Oakland, which we're in an old Pete's Coffee warehouse. It's only about 79,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet of that's production floor. And out of that, we're currently able to do about 300 units a year. That ends up being about 360,000 square feet out of that 50,000 square feet of floor. Where we're going is to actually get to 1,000 units a year, or 1.2 million square feet of production out of that same 50,000 square feet of production floor. And so what that opens up is the possibility, because it doesn't make sense to ship across the country and across the world from Oakland. Like, I love Oakland, I love California, but it is expensive to build here. And again, then you get into also the additional carbon cost of transportation and everything. And so what we're focused on is a network of Mighty factories set up in existing idle capital near where the demand is. So not only are we creating housing for market, but we're creating jobs for a market, and good jobs that don't require you to drive 2 hours each way, but are actually accessible and attainable. And because we're doing prefabrication, we're taking the most difficult and dangerous parts of the build. I mean, framing of houses is like the second most dangerous job in America after mining. It's like 3,000 or 4,000 injuries and deaths a year. And we're giving that to the robots, and we're giving that to the printers, because why put people in harm's way if we don't need to? And in turn, we reserve that human touch for the part that really makes sense, because we're only planning on automating about 80% of the process. There's always going to be a portion that it just makes sense for humans to do. And so even though we're reducing labor hours overall by 90%, our goal at the end of the day is to actually create more work by increasing productivity by over 20 times. So that's because what we're truly trying to solve we're not trying to replace labor. That's not our goal. Our goal is to address the fact we do not have enough people to build all the housing we need. And there's something like 400,000 construction jobs open in America right now that no one's taking. And we're losing a lot of skilled labor because they're retiring and they're not coming back in. People who used to come in construction are becoming programmers or joining the gig economy. And we want to bring new technology and new way to build so they can actually see ourselves in the construction space again, because we need them.
And what does it look like in terms of as you expand out of California into different locations? I mean, say Chicago, where I am.
Yeah.
the weather is crappy and
Oh, you kidding me? Oh, the lake effect snow is wonderful.
but are there any concerns? I know, like from a concrete perspective, if you're building 3D printed concrete in the middle of winter, like it's a tough ask.
Yeah. So that's one of the, again, a nice thing about prefab is that we're building in a controlled environment. So it really doesn't matter what it's like outside. It just matters what it's like inside when we're printing, and then we're able to deliver it. And as far as withstanding everything, we've done extensive testing. I mean, part of why we picked California is that along with having one of the most stringent building codes in the world, it also has a lot of climate zones. I mean, we got everything from Death Valley to Tahoe. So it's important. So for being able to deliver California allows us to demonstrate the ability to take snow loads, the ability to take cold weather. We also do extensive testing with UL on extreme cold, extreme heat, variations, and testing how that impacts, and it performs really well with all of that. And so it's just a matter of adjusting the design to meet the needs of the specific climate zones. But we've already designed our material and our technology to be incredibly energy efficient. So for a 6-inch panel, we're able to get an R value of over 20, close to 25 with our new one, I believe. And we're actually actively exploring how do we make that better? Because we've actually committed as a company to being carbon neutral by 2028. Which is about 22 years ahead of the broader construction industry, but something that we feel is really, really important, because if we're going to solve the housing crisis, we have to be addressing the climate crisis, or else we might have housing, but it's not going to be in a world we want to live in anymore.
Sure.
And so that's something that we're really excited about. But yeah, the prefab definitely makes some creates advantages for delivering places like Chicago, because we can build in the winter, or we can build in the summer when it's just as miserable, but on the opposite end. I mean, I grew up in Michigan, so I understand a Great Lake summer. It's actually, people think I moved to California because of winter. I'd say probably more because of summer. Those days of 90% humidity and 90 degrees just now.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about kind of what was your career start? How did you get involved with the company?
Yeah. So prior to Mighty Buildings, I was working as a sustainability consultant. I did my graduate work here in the Bay at Presidio Graduate School, which is one of the first programs in the world to center the entire curriculum around systems thinking and sustainability. And so I did their dual degree, so both an MBA as well as an MPA, so public as well as business administration, and have been working with organizations, public, private, nonprofit, helping them identify opportunities to improve sustainability. So looking at their building system, building operations, waste, energy, water, how their employees get to work, how their employees throw out garbage. It's amazing the impact you can have by moving a garbage can 10 feet. And so I'd help them model out those impacts, but more importantly, I'd help them model out the business impacts. Because for us, and for me personally, and for us at Mighty Buildings, sustainability is really about maximizing impact while balancing the needs of people, planet, and profit. And so it's really like, you can be the greenest, most socially conscious company in the world, but if no one's buying your product, it doesn't matter, because you're not going to have impact, because you're going to go out of business. So being able to make that business case was really important. It also, while the person who brought me in might have been a big sustainability person and really, really gung-ho about it, they still have to make that case to the C-suite. And so it's really important. That's something that we do here too, is like, okay, here's the sustainability impacts, but more importantly, here's the impact of the bottom line. So usually I'd start with the business impacts, then bring in and by the way, you're also saving this much water, this much energy, reducing your waste this much, having this brand value add, that's this story you get to tell and who you get to be, and show that you're living into your professed values that much better. And I connected with my co-founders. So, because who at the time were based out of Singapore, even though they're all originally from Russia. Our CEO of Slavo is running a venture firm there that's invested in a number of some great startups. And our CTO had moved there because he had a 3D printing pen company. And then our CEO ended up investing in it, sold at Best Buy, did really well. But as a part of that, they connected with a former classmate of mine who was at Indiegogo at the time, because they were doing some crowdfunding around it. So when they had the idea to bring 3D, to take this idea for bring it into the construction space. And the reason for that is, their whole thing was like, this is cool tech. What big idea can we try and solve? And the reality is, construction is the last major industry to embrace new technology to unlock productivity. Every year, along with the impact that has on housing, and the fact that like by 2025, like 1.5 billion people are going to be dealing with housing scarcity because of the lack of housing. It also means the industry is leaving a lot of money on the table. I think it's something like $1.6 trillion globally in unrealized revenue, just because the industry is not building as much as we could be. So there's a huge opportunity in terms of business and impact. And so they reached out to my friend Kate and were like, hey, we know you study sustainability. Do you know anyone who'd be interested in helping us with that and market research and compliance and other aspects? And she posted on our alumni Facebook page. And I think I actually suggested another friend who had been an advisor for my capstone. So my capstone, me and my team developed a business model to take clean, virgin, uncontaminated plastic waste from hospitals and turn it into 3D printer filament. Unfortunately, at the time we were focused on polypropylene because that was the biggest one. Not much of a polypropylene filament market at that time. Uh-huh. Or now even, yeah. Still a really cool concept. We'll see if it ever comes to reality. And if anyone steals it, I want royalties. I've been fascinated with 3D printing ever since, and this is where you realize just how big a nerd I am. Ever since I realized that Star Trek replicators were just atomic level 3D printing with energy modulation. So 3D printing is like something I've been fascinated by the concept, and so connected with Slava, our CEO. We had lunch here in San Francisco at the Tartine Manufactory. He shared the vision with me, and it clicked. It made sense to me. It was a big idea that could solve some big problems. Because one of the cool things about housing is it's a lever for so many different issues, like social, environmental, economic. And so if you can really help solve some of the big housing issues, you're directly impacting some of these other major issues that we as society are facing. And then obviously, because business is important too, and not entirely altruistic, you can also be a rounding error in the construction industry and be a multi-billion-dollar company. So there's that. So the opportunity for growth in that regard was huge as well. But at the end of the day, for me, it really is. It's about the impact. It's about the ability to change how the world builds for the better, and in doing so, help elevate people, help empower people, give people housing dignity housing with dignity. But also, our reality is that we're not focusing on affordable housing right now. We're focused on the missing middle. We're focusing on the people who make too much to get subsidized housing, but still have issues attaining housing they can afford, particularly in places like the Bay Area. And so part of that is both because where we are now, that's not our price point. In the future, though, and this is where I get excited because, as I mentioned, we're already moving into single family homes. And one of the things we're doing right now is also accelerating a development of multi-story. So we're looking at town ability, hopefully by end of next year, have a prototype like 3 to 5 story townhouse, or potentially, and obviously multi-story single family homes, but eventually like low-rise multifamily apartments. So be able to address density and urban and suburban infill. That's something like where I get really, really excited as well, because again, that's where we can have incredible impact. And the opportunity for really deploying 3D printing is in that space is the right opportunity. Is right. It's an area that there's huge need, and I think 3D printing provides benefits such as the ability to do fully finished volumetric modules that have the exterior already on them. Because even with prefabricated multifamily, you're generally taking a bunch of steel frame boxes, stacking them like Legos. Hopefully they align properly, because if you get even like a 1/4 inch off on one, by the time you get to the end of the row, that's a couple feet. But then you still have to add all the cladding and the exterior and the finishes. And so it's like 3D printing holds promise to really accelerate that and reduce the cost of that deployment, while also making it easier to build on difficult to build sites. So that's something I'm really, really excited about, particularly for prefabricated 3D printing. Obviously, Apis Core and some others have already done some on-site printing of like 2 to 4 story buildings, but I don't think that's going to lend itself to like 6 to 10, which is where we're looking to get to eventually.
Sure. I imagine over the last 16, 18 months with COVID, like the conversation around housing, supply chain, materials, wood, construction, people moving, like that's probably helped your business just in terms of getting like people talking about it, right? Like you could go into any bar right now and talk about lumber, and like it's on the main right? Like
my favorite meme recently has been a picture of someone driving with a trailer full of timber and just says, "Look, I passed a millionaire on the highway." Like it's legit. I mean, we're looking at literally, I think it was like $36,000 added to the cost of an average single family home, just because of lumber didn't impact us. Steel prices have increased by 20%. Some impact because we do incorporate some steel framing just as a safety buffer to make it easy for building officials to say yes. But we are accelerating with the fiber reinforced version of material, accelerating the removal of that. But overall, it hasn't had a huge impact on us. I mean, the storm in Texas did a little because that knocked out polymer production in Houston for a little bit. And then there was like some force majeure issues with some of the other chemical. It was one of those cascading things, like supply chains, obviously globally, are having issues, to put it nicely. But it's definitely made our offering more competitive. We were already about 40% less than comparable quality units, but that's only increased with the increase in costs. We've also seen contractors and developers here raising their prices as a way to reduce demand, because they just don't have the people or the materials to build everything that people want to build. So that it creates an opportunity in that way as well.
Yeah. And do you see that continuing, or is that kind of
certainly in the near term? I mean, the lumber shortage is a fascinating confluence of events. So the lumber shortage is due to one is a direct result of the climate crisis. One is that you had the fires of the last couple of years burning down millions of trees that otherwise would have been lumber right now. Additionally, the reason those millions of trees are so ripe for burning is bark beetles are decimating many of the forests, particularly up in Canada, and those had been ones that were being saved for their last harvest, because they're usually on a 50 to 60 year harvest cycle. So we were already heading into one of the lean periods, and the stock that was supposed to get us through that burned. So we're dealing with already a shortage of lumber because of that. Additionally, when the pandemic hit, the industry shut down most of the lumber mills. They misjudged how quickly demand would return, and it takes a little while to spin them back up. So that then added to it as well. So it's been a fascinating confluence of events that brought that price there. But yeah, it's definitely been something that's been a positive for us and really highlights the importance of having supply chains for construction that are outside of those traditional materials, and they're less prone to those impacts. Again, there's still impacts such as shortage of shipping containers and other things that we are dealing with that are impacting the global supply chains like ours. But that's something that has definitely benefited us, and is something that speaks to the importance of having a diversity of technologies in a sector in order to be as eliminate as much of that risk as possible. That's because that risk is only going to get higher as we continue to see the building impacts of the climate crisis. So.
And what do you like with your a typical customer that's going to buy kind of the house behind you? Like what are they thinking? What's their drive to go click?
It really ranges. Some people, it's, oh my God, I don't have as much house as I thought I did. I need more space. Some people, it's, hey, my kids are moved back. Kids lost their job. Why don't you move back? Oh, but I want you to have privacy too. And so multi-generational living. We're also seeing that particularly with what we saw with senior centers. A lot of people are bringing their older parents to live with them. Mm-hmm. But again, giving them their privacy and their space. That's both sides of that multi-generational. We're seeing a lot of baby boomers who are downsizing. So maybe they want less space and then rent out the house, or rent out the ADU for that rental income. Again, we're seeing people who just want a pool house, a little guest area, maybe some more guest space. Demographically, they're all over the place. I mean, we get young professionals, we get families with kids who are in their teens, we get families with kids who are in their toddlers, we get retired people. So it really runs the whole gamut. But it's exciting to see, and most of them are here in the Bay Area, but got a number in SoCal, and that's going to continue to expand. And then we're starting to look at again where do we place that next mighty factory outside of California to begin to be able to really deliver to other markets, because we're getting a lot of interest from across the country and across the world. And so we're really excited to step into that and really begin identifying deploying to other markets as well, and being able to utilize the local cost structures to make sure that what we're delivering is cost competitive outside of California.
And how do people kind of find out about this? I mean, like, even if, like, say today, if I wanted to go build a house or somewhere, like, that's like, it's not like Yelp, right? Like, you can just go, like, there's a lot involved, right? It's a big purchase. Like,
it is, yeah. So
this, like what's that been like?
Yeah, so our sales team is amazing, and they do a great job of trying to make the process as comfortable and as painless as possible. And so you start by going to our website or attending one of our webinars. We often will give a discounts on the climate compliance report stuff for attendees. Used to be we get to people through targeted Instagram and Facebook ads prior to coming out stealth mode last August. Mm-hmm. but yeah, go to our website. You can take a tour. We've got demo units here in Oakland. We also have some pop-up units in SoCal, as well as here up in Napa, San Diego, LA, Coachella Valley, I believe, is where we currently have units that people can book tours for visits. Once you do that, you're gonna fall in love with it because I'm obviously biased, but they're beautiful. The quality is great. Everyone's amazed how big the bathrooms are. And then you place a deposit, which is just, I believe, currently $1,000. And what that does is that gives us a commitment, and then we use that for those funds to do a compliance check where we go in, confirm that there's actually room to place an ADU there, send one of our team there, either ourselves or one of our GC partners, to the site to confirm all those measurements, to check the utilities, to see if there's any upgrades needed, put everything together that we need to create a detailed estimate of what the actual cost would be. So much depends on the site work that's needed. What's the delivery look like? Does it need grading? Does it need a retaining wall? What's required there? And so once we have that, then we put together a detailed estimate that we provide the customer. They sign the contract. We take another deposit, which I think is like 20%, something like that, and we start work. And then we go through the permitting phase. And right now the permitting has been one of the biggest bottlenecks, just because cities were many communities were already slow before the pandemic hit. Many, when the pandemic hit, many shut down completely. Others greatly reduced hours, and they had to transition to working remotely. And that's actually been one of the positives, is that the pandemic has helped shift digitalization of plan checks and of permitting, which is definitely a positive. But it's also meant that not only they're doing that transition, but they're doing that transitioning while on reduced hours and all this. So we're still seeing bottlenecks. They're slowly starting to get through. But so it takes usually anywhere from like 2 months to 6 months has been what we're seeing. But once those are in hand, we can have the unit go from a blank slate to installed in a month.
That's crazy. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. And we've got a number of units just waiting for permits on the ground on our shop floor right now, ready to go out. And I think we got something like 30 some odd in the backlog. They're going through the permitting process. So it's definitely an exciting time. And if anyone's interested, they can learn more at www.mightybuildings.com. We also have some videos on our YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/mightybuildings, where you can see the printing process. You can see one of our deliveries and installations, a number of webinars from our team members on the ADU, buying an ADU, on financing the ADU, on the whole process. So some great educational resources as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for telling the story and sharing with what you do. I think this is just an unbelievable opportunity to innovate, to make a difference, make an impact for the positive in a lot of different ways. So I commend what you guys are doing. I'm excited to see when you come to Chicago.
Oh, thank you so much, and really, really appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your listeners about what we're doing. And I hope we hear from some. And yeah, very excited to get to Chicago. As a Midwestern boy, been dying to see some mighty buildings on the Great Lakes.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thanks so much,
Sam. Thank you so much, Mike.
Perfect.